Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Today we got mid-round targets.
Let's do it.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's happening on this fine Wednesday afternoon, Fantasy Champions? We are just a short, I want to say 22 days from the first NFL game happening between the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs, team that won the Super Bowl.
We're 2 days away from our home league draft. That's exciting.
Man, I'm pumped on that. I'm excited. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. As we said a second ago, mid-round targets is what we're talking about on this episode. We're going to do another edition of this or that where we pick players from the same team and tell you whether or not you should take them. Before we jump into mid-round targets, check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter at the FFChamps and on the screen somewhere our personal handles, Instagram at the Fantasy Champions, and you can go to facebook.com/The Fantasy Champions to check us out on there. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform, leave a review and share this podcast with your friends. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to click the bell for notifications. We also have the draft guide, which is live. You have a couple more days left. Friday is the deadline to get into the listener league for the Fantasy Champions and try to beat us. So that is your deadline. You got to buy the guide before then. After then, you can still buy the draft guide. You're just not going to be in the listener league. The draft guide runs at $25. It has full rankings, breakouts, busts, player draft values, breakdowns, all kinds of stuff. So be sure to tell your friends, buy the draft guide, prepare for your draft. Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
So like I said, we're gonna talk about mid-round targets. This is so the big part about this year, particularly, has been that I think that everyone is kind of taking the same approach in terms of the running back only strategy, and I'll just say about that particular strategy this year, I don't want to subscribe to a straight strategy. If you choose to take a wide receiver in the second round, or you decide to go wide receiver only, that's your prerogative. Excuse me. I like to be a little more fluid in my draft. If guys fall to me, I take them. Like if I'm in the second round at pick 15 and or 16 and, Devontae Adams is still on the board, of course I'm going to take him. Like you have to be more fluid than just saying, oh, I can't take him because there's still running backs on the board. So like, just get off that. But what's happening for a lot of people is that they're drafting two running backs. And so that makes the middle round wide receivers extremely valuable. And third round, fourth round, fifth round wide receivers. We're not going to talk about the third round, but essentially how this is going to break down is we're going to go through each round, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and give you one, maybe two players from that round that you can draft and be surefire with. Almost must drafts for each round. So we'll start with the fourth round here. I have two guys listed because I honest to God couldn't choose. But fourth round, Juju Smith-Schuster at ADP 39, and then Calvin Ridley at ADP 42. Now, you can't go wrong with either one of these guys. I made a little graph for myself a couple days ago with Juju and Calvin Ridley and A.J. Brown, just to kind of get an idea of, had stuff like whether their quarterback is going to throw 26 or more touchdowns this year. How easy is their schedule? Is their offense going to be a top 15 offense? Are they going to get 130 or more targets? And so Juju checked out every box with the exception of I don't know if Pittsburgh's going to be a top 15 offense. And you could also ask the question of whether or not Ben Roethlisberger will throw 26 or more touchdowns, but he's done it every season for the last 5 years.
Yep.
So with the exception of last year when he got hurt. But so I think Juju has checked out all the boxes. And then as far as Calvin Ridley is concerned, he also checked out a lot of boxes. The only one that I was more concerned with is the 130 or more targets. I don't know if he can reach that total. I think 120 targets is a safe projection for him. But if he does move up in terms of target share and gets 130, 140 targets, I would probably take him over Juju.
Okay.
just out of worry about Ben Roethlisberger, but that's just me. So either one of these guys is an absolute freaking steal in the 4th round at wide receiver. I don't think Calvin Ridley is going to have top 5 upside. I think Juju does have like top 6 or 7 upside. So both of these guys,
I think he's got top 5 upside. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you have good upside with Juju. I think Calvin Ridley, like if he gets 140, 150 targets, I guess you can throw him in that range of top 5 upside. But either one of these guys has breakout potential this year. And to get them in the 4th round as your like second wide receiver is it's stealing.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many talented wide receivers in the 4th, 5th round as well. I mean, we could have put Robert Woods on this list. We could put Allen Robinson in this list.
Yeah.
DJ Moore in this list. Like, there's so many very talented wide receivers. AJ Brown as well. Yeah, there's. I mean, we both really like. So there's a lot of talented wide receivers in that round. I mean, you know how much I love Juju. I think in 2018 he was the wide receiver. He would have been the wide receiver 2. Yeah. If you put up his fantasy numbers from 2018 to last season. He would have been like ahead of Chris Godwin and just behind Michael Thomas. Wow. And that was with Antonio Brown. With Antonio Brown gone, obviously.
The one thing that he just had problems with was touchdowns, and that was because Brown was the red zone target.
It's possible that he could lead the league in receptions this year. I mean, you look at in that 2018 season when Ben Roethlisberger was healthy, the Steelers threw the ball almost 700 times. They were first in the NFL with 689 passing attempts. Yeah. And then last year, I believe they went way down. They only had 510. So almost 200 full less passing attempts. I expect that number to go up. I expect Juju to get a lot of those targets and going to have a monster year. And then for Calvin Ridley, right. I've heard a lot of people talk about they don't like him because of that target, that there's not enough targets to go around. And
that's literally the hardest part for me. He's got Matt Ryan's going to throw 26 or more touchdowns. That offense is going to be top 15 or better. He has the 3rd easiest schedule in fantasy football or something like that right now. So it's like the only question is whether or not the man gets over 120 targets. And it's like so difficult because if he only gets 120 targets, I'm just a little more concerned about it,
Yeah. But I've said this before. I'll say it again. I should probably just tweet it. The Atlanta Falcons have 258 vacated targets this year, which is number 1 in the NFL by like 60-ish targets, 70-ish targets. Like they have so many targets to go around this year. Yes, some of that's going to go to Todd Gurley, who he'll probably take the Devontae Freeman, which was like around 65 targets, I think, 70 targets. And sure, Hayden Hurst will take some of Austin Hooper's targets. I don't think he's going to take all of them, but even if you say he will, that still leaves 100 vacated targets. Wow. Or around 100 vacated targets for Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones. And I don't think Julio Jones is going to get any more targets than he did. Like, he's still going to get 170 targets. What it does is it just shows that Julio Jones will still get the amount of targets that he'll get. And what it does is it allows Calvin Ridley to now jump up to like the 130, 140 target range, which if he does that, again, like you said, you would take him over Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, he's a very talented young receiver in a solid breakout age. He
would be up there with the DJ Moore, because DJ Moore is technically a 3rd round pick right now. I mean, a 5th round pick right now, or somewhere in that vicinity. I don't know. I got my ADP consensus off for 4 for 4. So check it out there, but that's where the ADP is. I don't remember where DJ Moore was going. I think it was late 3rd. But for me, I think when you're looking at either one of these guys, you can't really miss. Calvin Ridley, I think, has like this, like with the target share, I think he has a really high upside. The problem is that, like I said, that we don't know if the target share is going to be there. Now, your points are extremely valid. Like there is 258 targets vacated?
258 vacated targets.
So like if that is the amount of vacated targets, I think you could definitely see Calvin Ridley get 20 to 30 more targets from last year, which I think he was pacing at 110. So if he does that, he might hit 140 or 150. And if he does that, I mean, he's going to be, you remember when Juju had 166 targets and finished wide receiver 6? He referenced his numbers a second ago. I think Calvin Ridley is within that realm of outcomes. And I think the big thing about him is that the difference between Juju and AB that year and Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones this year is that Calvin Ridley is a monster in the red zone. And I think that he is going to catch a lot of touchdowns if he does get that target share. So I love Calvin Ridley this year. I think he's a breakout player. Juju, we've been waiting so long. And I hope that Ben Roethlisberger's arm functions.
Yeah, me too.
I haven't seen any video from Pittsburgh with Ben Roethlisberger.
I've seen one
throwing.
video that was in July, I think. So it wasn't during training camp, but he looked good. He was throwing to Juju and Deontay Johnson. He was throwing deep balls and stuff.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. It also depends for Juju, too. It also depends if they move him into the slot and keep him there. I think with Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool playing the outsides, I think that Juju Smith-Schuster most definitely will just stick in the slot, which is great news for him. If Deontay Johnson works out, it's great news for Juju because it kind of takes the focus off him inside and because everyone thinks that you select, coaches sit down and they select a wide receiver for their corner to cover each week, their star corner. And they go, oh yeah, we got to cover this guy with Juju, but they actually play it based on where you are positionally on the field. So Stephen Gilmore for the New England Patriots will always play the outside role. He won't play in the slot, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So that's generally how defensive-minded coaches work. They don't really focus on the wide receiver itself. They just play, where the person does best positionally on the field. So for me, I think if Juju goes to the slot and Deontay Johnson's on the outside, that kind of takes a little bit of pressure off Juju in terms of being the feature outside, big-time AB receiver, and puts it a little bit on Deontay Johnson, which is okay. But I think Juju, if Big Ben is okay and he gets 160 targets, he's a top 5 wide receiver.
Right.
Bar
yeah, I 100% am with you on that one.
Let's talk about the next guy in the 5th round is Terry McLaurin. A lot of good guys in the 5th round, but I love McLaurin. Now right now it's literally a scratch between, I think ADP for DJ Chark is 58 and Terry McLaurin is 60. Now both of these guys have the same problems. These guys are at the bottom of my little sheet that I created in terms of, all those 4 metrics I talked about with the touchdowns and the easy schedule and all that stuff. They're pretty much at the bottom of all 4 of them, right. Except with the exception of target share. Their offenses aren't good. I don't think either one of them have a quarter. Gardner Minshew might throw 26 or more touchdowns.
I doubt it.
He might, but it's hard. It's going to be hard for him to do. Haskins probably won't. But I just both of them out of sheer just no one being there to catch the football. I think that most of the touchdowns that the team throws in general are going to go to both of those guys.
Absolutely.
For Mclaren, and I don't usually buy players on bad offenses, which is why why they're 5th round picks and not 4th, 3rd round picks. So I think I would choose Mclaren at this point. Because of his explosiveness, because he's going to get targeted. I would say he's going to get targeted more than Chark. And I think that, he's in a second year kind of, I guess, breakout season at this point. If he gets targeted 130, 140 times based on his efficiency metrics and what he did last year, Mclaurin could definitely be a top 10 wide receiver that you're drafting in the 5th, 6th round. Which is a great steal.
No, for sure. I like DJ Chark. I love Terry McLaurin. Last year he had 93 targets in 14 games as a rookie. With this year with Harmon, who I believe he tore his ACL early on the season, there is nobody in that Washington offense that's going to even compete with targets.
Right.
Steven Sims Jr. will probably get, I projected him at 80, 85 targets, and that's being nice. And it still left McLaurin for 135 targets. Antonio Gandy-Golden, who is a rookie 4th round pick, will probably get a lot of targets. I think Antonio Gibson will probably get about 70 targets. That still leaves McLaurin for 130, 100. Honestly, if the Redskins decide to throw the ball more too this year than they did last year, McLaurin could easily end up with 150 targets. I love Terry McLaurin. There is absolutely nobody in that offense that's going to take any work from him. Yeah. And like you said, especially the red zone. He is going to get a lot of I expect him to get a lot of touchdowns this year, which will be very good things for fantasy. He had last year at 7 touchdowns, again, as a rookie in 14 games. So with potentially more targets, I could see him getting 10 touchdowns.
Yeah. Like I said, I think like what if Dwayne Haskins only throws 20 touchdowns? Do you really think 50% of his entire like touchdown share is going to go to Terry McLaurin?
Honestly, yes. They threw the ball. They had 18 touchdown passes last year. McLaurin had 7 of them.
Okay.
So I honestly think that's possible. I don't
like the chances of that,
but
it's very hard for a player to do. Like, I think that there might be 20 touchdowns for the like. And here's the conversation that you have to have too: is that if Alex Smith ends up being the starter and he's relatively decent, I think he could probably throw more touchdowns than 20. You know what I mean? Like 24 or somewhere around there, which ups McLaren's ceiling. I'm not saying it's impossible for him to score 50% of his team's touchdowns in terms of passing, but
it's not impossible. I mean, it is obviously.
I think
hard,
8 touchdowns is probably a safer bet.
Sure.
For him, but again, 10 touchdowns ceiling.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fair, and that's more reasonable, but it is possible. Like, they had 18 touchdown passes last year, which is awful. I think that was probably one of the worst, if not the worst in the league.
Yeah.
And McLaurin still had 7 touchdown receptions because there's nobody else there.
That's ridiculous.
Steven Sims had 4.
Yeah.
I think Jeremy Sprinkle had 1, and Vernon Davis had 1. Like, Steven Sims is the only other guy in the offense. I think he had 4 receiving touchdowns.
Yeah.
But other than him, like, there's nobody else that's going to get a lot of touchdowns. So I honestly think McLaurin, it's possible for him to get near almost 50%. I don't think 50% is a little much, but to get like 40%, like, it's possible.
So Chark or McLaurin for you?
For me, it's McLaurin or McLaren, whatever. But it's very close.
It's close.
I would like both guys, and I think
I think everyone is in that same range of it being, because the ADP has McLaurin Chark up, I think, at ADP 58. So it's like they're very close in terms of ADP.
Yeah.
But McLaurin, like, I think for a lot of fantasy, I've heard multiple fantasy experts say the same thing of McLaurin over Chark, even though Chark is going a little bit later. So I would agree with that sentiment. I think I'm definitely taking Terry McLaurin over DJ Chark, but either one, it's literally you're splitting.
I don't
hairs.
think you are. I think when push comes to shove, you're going to take Chark.
Me?
Yeah. You.
Oh, is it because of Minshew? I like the stash. What can I say?
Yeah, I can't blame you on that.
I actually probably think that who scores more touchdowns, Jags or Washington?
The Jags.
Yeah, I think the Jags.
It's so, I don't know. That's like asking.
That's like I said, both of these guys are splitting hairs.
Right.
So, I mean,
a lot of people would say Washington, but I actually probably do think Jacksonville's might.
People hate
their
Jacksonville.
It's a little underrated. It's not good by any means, but people treat it like it's the worst in the league, and I think it's pretty good. It's one of the worst in the league, but it's not.
It's not that bad.
It's not like an absolute bottom feeder. Like Gardner Minshew threw 21 touchdowns last year.
Yeah. So we would say buy Terry McLaurin in the 5th round, the legit middle of the top 10 rounds. And then the 6th guy, just so you know, the next episode we're going to do is late round targets, and that's going to be 7, 8, and 9 rounds. So, but this is the final round we'll do, and then we'll jump into this or that. But Kareem Hunt is the 6th round guy. Now, after you get through past the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, if you drafted like I have been doing in every mock draft, literally every spot in the draft, you would get probably 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds, and then you would probably go 3 wide receivers. At this point in the 6th round, I think it's okay to look at drafting a Kareem Hunt or a J.K. Dobbins, or if Jonathan Taylor's there, you would smash that button. But I think the 6th round is probably a safe bet to start looking at running backs. Ronald Jones too, I'll say. But it's a safe bet to start 6th, 7th round, a safe bet to start looking at running backs to draft. But this is the best running back of the 6th round. His ADP right now is 67. So he's one of the better, I think he's a higher level or a mid round, 6th round pick. So, you could probably get him at the turn. If you're at the back end at pick 60 or 61, and do that. But if you're at the end of the 6th round, you're probably not going to get Kareem Hunt.
Right.
So I've talked about Kareem Hunt and how incredibly, we obviously know he's good. Like, he's a freaking talented running back. So it's like, I feel like he needs to be on a team that doesn't have Nick Chubb. so unfortunate.
Well, he's on a 1-year deal. So
he's on a 1-year deal last time.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but anyway, they're bringing in Kareem Hunt. And last year at the end of the season, Freddie Kitchens used him quite a lot in the passing game. And they didn't really use him a whole lot. I think if you pace him out for the whole season, it was like, for a whole 16-game season based on the games that he played in, it was like 120 rushes and like 60 catches or 70 catches or so. But I heard on a podcast the other day, if you give, just based on opportunity, right? The Cleveland Browns usually, or Kevin Stefanski, the new head coach, was giving Dalvin Cook and all the other running backs on the Vikings, team 30 or more rushes a game. Now, if you were to break that down and give friggin', just say there's 2 running backs available, Nick Chubb gets 18 rushes and Kareem Hunt gets 12. You pace the 12 rushes a game out to a full 16-game season, and Kareem Hunt gets 190 rushing attempts. Top that off with his 50 to 60 catches, and he's at 240, 250 attempts and 1 fantasy point per opportunity, which he's gotten his whole entire career, no matter where he's gone. And he's at 240 fantasy points, which makes him a top 6 running back. I don't think that happens. But I think that a lot of people, when you look at Kareem Hunt, everyone's saying, oh, he's a great handcuff if Nick Chubb gets hurt, and they're all drafting him based on Nick Chubb getting hurt. And it's no, don't draft him based on Nick Chubb getting hurt. Draft him based on the fact that he could be a relatively decent high-end RB2 in fantasy football and a good flex play for your team with baked-in value that if Nick Chubb does get hurt, Kareem Hunt is a top 5 running back or a top 6 running back. So I think for me, when you look at the numbers for Kareem Hunt, you start breaking them down. I think it's a great pick in the 6th round, and it's a must-own kind of player in that round. So for me, I'm targeting him in the 6th round, no matter where I am in the draft. If he's on the board, I'll take him. If he's not on the board, then
right.
Sucks.
No, I'm with you 100% with Kareem Hunt. I mean, obviously, you shouldn't draft him just as a handcuff.
Right.
He can honestly be a week-to-week flex. Let's look at his floor. Last season, when he came in for Cleveland, he played those 8 games. In PPR settings, I think half PPR, he was the RB19. In half PPR, he was the RB17.
Yeah.
With 101 fantasy points. And if you add that up, I had 101.4. So if you add that up, it's 202.8. He would have been the RB18 in all fantasy. So that's just the floor. So if he does that this year, you're drafting the RB18 in the 6th round. That's pretty solid value. I mean, that's a really good week-to-week flex with the potential upside of, you said, being a top 5 running back if anything happens to Chubb. So even without that, I mean, he's still a very, very solid flex player and he could honestly, he's the low-end RB2, which is not bad in the 6th round considering all the running backs that are out there. I mean, he finished ahead in half PPR ahead of David Montgomery last season.
Yeah.
Ahead of Phillip Lindsay as the starting running back. He finished ahead of Chris Carson. So Le'Veon Bell. So there's some players that he was very good last year, even as the backup, quote unquote, to Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick in the 6th round, and I think it's I hate saying it's stealing, but it really is. And I think it's a good pick. I think if you're really looking for that running back, and this is where if you did go 0 running back, you probably ended up with David Montgomery or David Johnson or Todd Gurley or somebody like that, Leonard Fournette in the 3rd round. And this is where you could probably snag Kareem Hunt and put him as your 2nd running back after drafting 2 or 3 wide receivers. So it's I mean, I wouldn't be in love with that, but you kind of get the picture. 6th, 7th round is where the running backs are going to be in terms of, as soon as you hit the 8th, 9th round, the running backs just disappear. But 7th, 8th, 6th, 7th round is probably where you're going to get your final startable running backs before you start just drafting for depth or potential breakout. Let's move into this or that. If you haven't heard of, before we do that, let's jump into an advertisement. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone, so it makes it super convenient. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on any major platform without you having to do all the legwork in the back end. You can make money from your podcast immediately with a no minimum listenership, so they'll find you sponsors right away that you can add to your podcast. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So be sure to download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Let's jump into this or that really quickly and then end the show before 30 minutes. That would be fantastic. So this or that, as you know, we're going to take players from the same team and ask whether or not you should take one player or the other. So we'll start with the Rams, 2 wide receivers, Robert Woods at ADP 506 or Cooper Kupp at ADP 402.
This is a really, really good one. It's really tough for me because I do like Cooper Kupp more than Robert Woods. But with that ADP, I'm going to say Robert Woods. Okay. I think both players are going to be really similar. Mm-hmm. Robert Woods also has a rushing floor. The last few seasons of his career, Sean McVay likes to use in rushing situations. He gets around 15 carries a game.
Yeah, he usually gets 100 rushing yards.
A season, which is pretty solid. And with the amount of targets Robert Woods gets, I think he's a steal in the middle of the 5th round.
Yeah. I would have to take Cooper Kupp was insanely good last year. I think he was the wide receiver 4 over the course of the whole season. He was, like I said, very good. I think if you look at his numbers in a normal wide receiver, season where half the top end wide receivers don't bust or get hurt,
right?
Cooper Kupp is really like a wide receiver 8 or 9 overall instead of the wide receiver 4, which is still very good. But I think at the 402, I noticed that I've just been completely avoiding Cooper Kupp, not on purpose. Just based on like where, like there's other players in that 4th round. We just talked about 4th round guys, Juju Smith-Schuster, AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, Juju. I already said Juju's name, Allen Robinson, like guys like that in the 4th round that you can snag and get as good wide receivers that have better upside than Cooper Kupp. Whereas if Cooper Kupp was closer to that 506, I would be like, oh yeah, definitely. I'm going to say Robert Woods because he has a higher floor than Cooper Kupp. And I think that I don't think he breaks out and becomes a top 5 guy. Like I think Cooper Kupp has that ability as we saw last year. But I think in the 5th round, you can get a guy that's going to maybe have that upside or that potential to break out probably at a better rate than Cooper Kupp is. What is he, 30, 29, 28? I can't remember.
Cooper Kupp?
Yeah.
I think he's only 27.
I think the other concerns that I have with Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods is that both their offense is just completely trash.
It's not trash. It's just.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. I overhyped it. It's middle of the road. It's just average.
Yeah, it's not what it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah. So I would definitely take Robert Woods at 506 because of the floor. Like I think Cooper Kupp has a chance just to completely drop out for some reason. It's close, very close between these two, but I would take Robert Woods at 506. I think you're getting the same exact player, to be honest with you, at a cheaper value. And that's why I would take Robert Woods there. Then the second one, Chris Godwin, ADP 211, or Mike Evans, ADP 301.
Another close one, but this one isn't nearly as close. I'm taking Chris Godwin over Mike Evans. And we've talked about before why we like Chris Godwin over Mike Evans with the slot situation. So for me, both these guys looks like they're going in about pretty much the exact same spot. I'll take Chris Godwin over Mike Evans.
I would agree with you 100%. I don't think it takes much discussion. We have Mike Evans as a bust this year, and we have Chris Godwin as I think he could finish as the top 3 wide receiver again this year. Once you do it twice, you always get drafted in the 1st round. So that's what Godwin's got to do. But with Brady there, it's just it is inevitable that he's going to get the work, and I think that he'll probably finish with a lot more fantasy points than Mike Evans. So. Not a bad play there, but thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. We actually finished under 30 minutes today. Congratulate us. Thank you very much. Don't forget to check out our website, thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to leave a comment down below. Like it on YouTube. Review, all that stuff. We'll talk to you tomorrow, Fantasy Champs.
Later.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.